My name's Emma, and I'm a 22-year-old graduate student from Manchester who's been living in Lyon for the past several months as part of my research program. I've never been great at making friends quickly. My younger brother's the social butterfly in the family, but the few people I've gotten close to here have become really important to me. I won't drag this out with unnecessary background, but my time in France up until recently had been pretty uneventful. Sure, I'd had a few uncomfortable encounters with some aggressive locals near the train station, but nothing that made me want to leave. The architecture is stunning, the food is incredible, and honestly, the weather beats the constant drizzle back home any day of the week. About 3 weeks ago, my friend Antoine suggested we take a weekend trip through the countryside to visit his family's region near a small town called Villeneuve. The area is dotted with these gorgeous little communes that most tourists never bother with. The kind of places where locals seem genuinely surprised to hear English being spoken. About 15 kilometers from Villeneuve, there's a slightly bigger village called Saint-Michel-les-Thermes. I know I'm gushing here, but it really is one of those picture-perfect French towns you see in films. There's even a 2 Michelin star restaurant there that we decided to book for my partner Marcus's birthday dinner. He was turning 25, and it was also coming up on 3 years since we'd first met, so it felt like the right occasion to splurge a bit. Marcus had flown in from London for the week. He was taking vacation days from his consulting job, and we were both excited to actually spend quality time together after months of video calls and weekend visits. We made a reservation for 4 at the restaurant, me, Marcus, Antoine, and his girlfriend Sophie. Originally, we looked into staying at the restaurant's boutique hotel, but the prices were absolutely insane, way beyond what any of us could afford on student budgets. Instead, we found an Airbnb listing on the edge of town, a converted farmhouse that looked charming enough in the photos. The dinner itself was phenomenal, easily one of the best meals I've ever had. Afterward, we sat on the restaurant's terrace, drinking local wine and chain smoking like proper French people, laughing at how we'd all become such cliches. We spent another hour wandering through the village, taking photos of the old fountain in the square and the weird collection of ceramic owl statues that were apparently some local tradition. By the time we made it back to the Airbnb, it was well past midnight. We were all pleasantly buzzed and tired, but we opened another bottle of wine anyway and sat around the rustic kitchen table, smoking and talking about our plans for the next day. Sophie is quite religious and had been wanting to visit a famous pilgrimage site about 2 hours away, so we'd agreed to head there in the morning. Eventually, around 1:30, we all decided to call it a night. The Airbnb had 2 bedrooms, one for me and Marcus, one for Antoine and Sophie. Our room was on the ground floor, with exposed stone walls and heavy wooden beams across the ceiling. There was a large window that looked out onto what I assumed was either a garden or a field, though it was too dark to really tell. Marcus opened the window briefly to air out the room because it smelled a bit musty, then pulled the exterior shutter closed, but didn't bother with the latch. He's not used to European-style shutters, so I don't think he realized there was a locking mechanism. I fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day, but I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. to a strange sound. It was a scratching or scraping noise, like something dragging against wood or metal. My first thought was that it might be a stray dog, or maybe a cat trying to get into a bin outside. The sound stopped after maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and I convinced myself it was nothing. I rolled over and closed my eyes again. But then Marcus got up to use the bathroom, and the movement woke me fully. I heard him shuffle across the room and open the door to the hallway. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to come back so I could fall asleep again. That's when this overwhelming feeling of wrongness washed over me. I can't explain it rationally, but I suddenly felt certain that someone was watching me. My skin went cold despite the warm night air. I turned my head slowly toward the window. The shutter that should have been closed was now partially open, maybe 15 or 20 centimeters of gap, and in that gap I could see a hand, just a hand, illuminated by the moonlight, gripping the edge of the shutter and holding it open. The hand was holding something rectangular, pointing it toward the bed, toward me. Then I heard the sound, click, 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 click. It was rhythmic and mechanical, a sound I hadn't heard in years, not since my grandmother used to take family photos with her old film camera, but I recognized it instantly, the sound of a manual camera shutter. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen. It felt like forever, but it was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. My mind was racing, but my body wouldn't respond. I was lying there in just my underwear, the sheet pushed down to my waist because of the heat, and someone was photographing me through the window. Finally, I managed to scream Marcus's name. The moment I made a sound, the hand jerked back, and the shutter swung wider. I caught a brief but clear glimpse of the person's hand in the moonlight as they grabbed the window frame to climb down. They were wearing a ring on their left ring finger, something chunky and unusual looking, maybe made of dark wood or horn with some kind of carved pattern on it. Then they dropped out of sight. Marcus came running back into the room, and I was babbling, trying to explain what I'd just seen. He didn't hesitate. He ran straight outside through the front door to try to catch whoever it was. I heard him shouting something, but by the time I'd pulled on clothes and followed him out, he was standing alone in the empty street. He said he'd heard footsteps running away, getting fainter, but he couldn't see anyone. The street was completely dark except for one distant street lamp. We went back inside and woke up Antoine and Sophie. Antoine wanted to call the police, but Marcus pointed out that we had no description of the person, no evidence, and we'd all been drinking. We didn't even know if they'd actually broken any laws by standing outside and taking photos through a window. Sophie was terrified and wanted to leave immediately, but it was 3 a.m. and we were in the middle of nowhere. None of us slept after that. We sat in the kitchen with all the lights on, checking and rechecking that every door and window was locked. I kept thinking about that hand, that ring, the mechanical clicking of the camera. Who does that? Who creeps around in the middle of the night photographing strangers through windows? The moment the sun started coming up around 6, we packed our bags. Antoine and Sophie went to get the car, while Marcus and I returned the keys to the lockbox by the front gate. I sent a message to the host through the Airbnb app, explaining what had happened. And their response came about an hour later, a brief message saying they were sorry we'd had a bad experience, but that they couldn't be held responsible for things that happened outside the property. No offer of a refund, no suggestion to report it to anyone, nothing. Marcus is convinced it was the hosts themselves, since they seemed so unconcerned about it. Antoine thinks it was probably just some creepy local who targets tourists, knowing they won't stick around long enough to make trouble. We'll never know for certain. What haunts me most is knowing that somewhere out there, someone has photographs of me lying half naked in bed, completely unaware I was being watched. I have no idea who this person is, what they look like, or what they plan to do with those images. Are they sitting in some dark room looking at them right now? Or are they going to post them online somewhere? The thought makes me sick. I keep thinking about that ring. It was so distinctive, so unusual. If I ever saw it again, I'd recognize it immediately. But what would I even do? What could I do? We never went to that pilgrimage site. We drove straight back to Lyon, and none of us felt like talking. Sophie hasn't mentioned taking any more countryside trips, and honestly, neither have I. I'm counting down the weeks until my program ends and I can go home. I still can't sleep properly. Every time I'm in bed, I find myself staring at the windows. Even though I'm on the 4th floor of an apartment building now, I keep hearing that clicking sound in my head. Click, 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 click. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe in an Airbnb again. This happened about 8 months ago when I was visiting friends in Portland. I'm a pretty big guy, around 6'2", maybe 230, so I don't usually worry too much about walking alone at night. That detail becomes relevant later. I'd been staying at an Airbnb in the Pearl District with some college buddies for a long weekend. One of my friends, Marcus, had his own place about 6 blocks away, and I'd gone over there earlier in the evening to help him move some furniture. We ended up ordering pizza and playing video games until way later than I'd planned. By the time I checked my phone, it was already past 2:30 in the morning. The walk back to the Airbnb wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes if I took the direct route through the main streets. The area was pretty upscale, on lots of new apartment buildings with those floor-to-ceiling windows and modern lobbies. Even at that hour, most of the buildings had their exterior lights on, creating these pools of white light every 50 feet or so along the sidewalk. I remember the air was cool, but not cold, typical for that time of year. There were still a few people out, mostly younger folks, leaving bars or coming back from late dinners. I had my headphones in, but kept the volume low enough that I could hear my surroundings. My mom always taught me that, and it's a habit I've never broken. I was walking down Burnside when I passed two women, probably in their mid-20s, heading in the opposite direction. They were clearly drunk, not falling down drunk, but that happy, loud kind of tipsy where everything is hilarious. One of them was wearing heels and kept stumbling a little. The other one had her arm linked through her friend's, trying to keep her steady. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in their conversation. I gave them a polite nod as I passed and kept walking. About 20 seconds later, I turned left onto a side street that would take me straight to the Airbnb. This street was quieter, more residential, with those mid-rise apartment buildings that have retail spaces on the ground floor. Most of the shops were dark, except for their security lights. I'd barely made it 10 steps down this new street when I heard an engine behind me. Not unusual. Cars drove through here all the time. But something made me glance back over my shoulder. Maybe it was the way the engine sounded like it was idling, or maybe it was just instinct. That's when I saw the van. It was one of those older cargo vans, beige or tan colored, a Chevy or GMC from maybe the early 2000s. The kind with no rear windows, just solid metal panels. It had pulled up right at the corner I'd just turned from, and it was stopped in the middle of the street with its engine running. As I watched, the side door, the sliding one, opened. A man stepped out onto the street. He was shorter than average, maybe 5'6" or 5'7", with a thin build. He was wearing dark clothes, jeans and a hoodie, I think. Even from where I was standing, maybe 30 feet away, I could see him looking directly at the two drunk women who were still on the sidewalk. The women had stopped walking. I could see their body language change instantly. The laughter was gone. They'd gone completely still. And even from that distance, I could tell they were scared. The one in heels took a small step backward. The man from the van started walking toward them. Not running, but walking with purpose. His hands were at his sides, and he was saying something I couldn't hear. The van stayed where it was. Door still open. Engine still running. I don't know what made me do what I did next. I'm not a confrontational person by nature. I'm not a cop, not a security guard, just a regular guy who works in IT. But something about the whole scene felt completely wrong. The van with no windows, the guy emerging from the side door, not the front. The way he was approaching these two obviously vulnerable women at 3 a.m. The fact that the van was just sitting there, waiting. I turned around and started walking back toward the corner. Because as I got closer, I called out in the deepest, most authoritative voice I could manage. "Hey, what's going on here?" The effect was immediate and dramatic. The man spun around so fast he almost lost his balance. For a split second, we made direct eye contact. I couldn't make out his features clearly in the streetlight, but I could see his eyes widen. He looked shocked, almost panicked. Without saying a word, he turned and practically jumped back into the van. I heard him yell something, couldn't make out the words, and then the door slammed shut. The van's tires actually squealed as it took off down the street, running through a stop sign at the next intersection before disappearing around another corner. The whole thing, from the moment I called out to when the van disappeared, probably lasted less than 10 seconds. So I walked over to the two women. They were both pale, and the one who'd been stumbling in her heels was now completely sober-looking, gripping her friend's arm with white knuckles. "Are you guys okay?" I asked, trying to sound calm and non-threatening. "Oh my God," one of them said. Her voice was shaking. "Oh my God, what was that? What was he going to do?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but you shouldn't be out here alone. Where are you headed?" They pointed to one of the apartment buildings about half a block back in the direction they'd come from. They'd walked past their own building, too drunk to notice. I offered to walk them back, and they quickly agreed. We walked together back to their building, one of those newer ones with a doorman and security cameras visible above the entrance. The doorman was there and was sitting at his desk in the lobby, and he buzzed them in after they showed their key cards. They thanked me probably 5 times before going inside. I stood there for a minute after they left, just processing what had happened. Then I walked back to the Airbnb, checking over my shoulder more times than I like to admit. When I got back, my friends were already asleep. I sat in the living room for a while, debating whether I should call the police. But what would I even report? I hadn't witnessed an actual crime. The guy hadn't touched anyone, hadn't made any threats that I'd heard. He just gotten out of a van, and walked towards some people. That's not illegal. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of rideshare situation gone wrong, but then why would someone be sitting in the cargo area of a windowless van? Why would they peel out like that when someone simply asked what was going on? Why approach from a side door instead of the driver just rolling down a window? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I'd interrupted something bad, really bad, the kind of thing you hear about on the news, but never think you'll actually witness. I ended up not calling the police that night. I've regretted that decision sometimes, wondering if I should have at least made a report so there'd be a record of it. But I also knew that without a license plate number or better descriptions, there wasn't much they could do. What I did do was tell those women's doorman what had happened when I saw him the next morning. I described the van and suggested he mention it to the building security team and to any residents who might be coming home late. He took me seriously and wrote everything down. Looking back, I don't think I did anything particularly heroic. I didn't chase anyone down or physically intervene. I just used my voice and my presence. But I think that's the point I want to make with this story. Sometimes that's all it takes. Predators. And I really do think that's what that person was. Rely on isolation and vulnerability. They don't want witnesses. They don't want confrontation. If you see something that feels wrong, even if you can't articulate exactly why it feels wrong, trust that instinct. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to put yourself in danger. Sometimes just being present, just acknowledging what's happening, is enough to change the outcome. I still think about those two women sometimes. I wonder if they remember that night, or if it's just a blurry drunk memory for them. I hope they're more careful now. I hope they made it home safe every night after that. And I really, really hope I never see the tan van again. Three years ago, I met someone who completely derailed my life. We'll call her Morgan. I met Morgan at a coffee shop in downtown Riverside. She ordered the same obscure pastry I did, a cardamom bun that barely anyone ever bought. We laughed about it, exchanged numbers, and within 2 months she moved into my apartment. The arrangement was unusual, I'll admit. Morgan had very specific requirements for our relationship. I could only initiate intimacy when she wanted it. I paid all the bills, the rent for our place, and gave her a monthly allowance. I wasn't allowed to text her more than a single sentence at a time, and phone calls were limited to once every 7 days. She disappeared for days without explanation, and I was forbidden from asking personal questions about her past, her family, or where she went. I told myself it was just her being independent, that she was worth the boundaries. Everything shifted one evening in late autumn. I came home from work and found Morgan on the couch, staring at her phone with this expression I'd never seen before. It was this smug, satisfied grin that looked completely foreign on her usually blank face. She looked predatory. That night she pulled me close by my collar and was more passionate than she'd ever been. Something felt off about it, like her excitement was coming from somewhere else entirely, but I couldn't pull away. You have to understand, when someone like Morgan finally shows you attention, it's intoxicating. After she fell asleep, I scrolled through local news on my laptop. That's when I found the article about a college student who died. The report called it a likely suicide. A young woman had apparently jumped from a cliff near Clearwater Cove, a remote beach area with no surveillance cameras. The name of the town caught my attention immediately. Morgan had invited me on a trip there the previous weekend, but I'd had to cancel for work. She'd gone anyway, booking a 2-bedroom Airbnb despite going alone. The dead girl was Morgan's age and had attended the same university. I searched for her social media, but found nothing, either scrub clean or never there. The news article was sparse on details. No foul play suspected, just another tragic suicide. But I knew. Somehow, I just knew. Morgan slept peacefully beside me. During sex, she usually scratched and hit me, liked when I wore ties so she could yank them violently. But that night she'd been different, gentle, and almost affectionate. She'd held me close and kissed me repeatedly with genuine warmth. When Morgan woke up, I had breakfast ready, but the softness had evaporated. She took 2 bites before getting dressed. "Should I make dinner?" I asked, one of the few questions she permitted. She shrugged. "Make it. If I don't want it, you eat it. Finish this too." She gestured at her plate. I thought about the dead girl in the Airbnb booking, but said nothing. I watched her leave in her expensive blouse and designer coat, then ate her leftovers. The truth is, I think I loved Morgan more after that. The way she'd been that night. Could she reach that high again? Would she do it again and come back to me with that same warmth? That night, Morgan returned in a foul mood and demanded the bed to herself. I slept on the couch. Around 2 a.m., I woke to hear her giggling on a phone call. Yeah, she was pathetic. I barely pushed her, honestly. She climbed up herself. What? Obviously, I told her to. It was my idea. I even fooled my little pet. Her voice was sweet and innocent, like a teenager gossiping after class. About 5 weeks later, Morgan's mood shifted again. She was passionate and demanding that night, and afterward she held me close as we slept. In the morning, her good mood lingered. I hesitated before speaking. I'm glad you're happy. She looked at me, then smiled. You are? She got up and walked to the desk, rummaged through a drawer, then tossed a pair of serrated scissors onto the bed. Do something for me. She pointed at my inner thigh. Cut yourself here. Her finger traced along my skin. Do it. I was already aroused. She laughed. Go on, she urged. Okay. I did what she asked. It hurt like hell. But the next day, Morgan let me please her however I wanted. She seemed genuinely satisfied. That night I was allowed to sleep beside her. She clung to me and murmured someone else's name in her sleep. I was learning what made Morgan happy. By early the following year, I'd figured out her patterns. I ran over stray cats when we drove together. She acquired a handgun and kept it locked in her nightstand. We got high and spat off our balcony at people walking below. Strange things I'd never imagined doing. Once, I deliberately shoved into an elderly woman at the grocery store. When she scolded me, I followed her through the aisles, while Morgan watched, delighted. The woman eventually fled into a crowded restaurant. You should have followed her inside, Morgan said. Her mysterious phone calls decreased. I knew more about her than anyone. I also started helping her more directly, though we never explicitly discussed it. Our neighbor was a woman named Claire who lived alone with her young daughter. She complained a few times about noise from our bedroom. Her daughter's room shared a wall with ours. Morgan had rolled her eyes while I apologized and promised we'd be quieter. That complaint put Claire on Morgan's radar. Morgan made calls that day, to the mysterious friend who knew about her killing, and to others. She dragged me along because, as she explained, couples look less suspicious than single people. Plus, I had cash instead of her always using my credit card. Somehow Morgan tracked down Claire's ex-husband. We met him at a diner on the east side, and he was covered in prison tattoos with a scar cutting through his eyebrow. I didn't realize who he was until he mentioned Claire by name. You know Claire? Where is she? Does she know I'm here? His voice was aggressive. Relax, I said. Morgan laughed sweetly. Why would she? Are you two not getting along? She didn't visit me once when I was locked up, right after I lost custody. He cursed under his breath. I just want to see my daughter Emma. Of course you do, Morgan cooed. Claire can be controlling, honestly. I worry about Emma too. I've been trying to find them for months. She's actually our neighbor. I'm sure I can help you reconnect with Emma. The man's eyes lit up. I felt sick, but drove them back to our building. He admitted he'd been in prison for assault, but wouldn't say who he'd hurt. I thought of Claire, Juan, who always seemed nervous as she hurried Emma inside their apartment. That night, when Claire and Emma were asleep, Morgan handed the man a kitchen knife we'd never used. She held it by the blade. Emma should be with you. Claire isn't fit to be a mother. Just scare her with it, okay? Morgan rang Claire's doorbell. I watched, frozen. Shuffling sounds, then Claire's sleepy voice. Who is it? It's Morgan from next door. I need help, please. Morgan covered the peephole with her face. Please. Claire opened the door without hesitation, a woman helping another woman. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she stepped back. She turned to run, and that's when the ex-husband charged after her into the dark apartment. Screaming erupted. Morgan pushed me toward the stairs, pretending to run for help. When I had to play my part for the hallway cameras, I shouted and grabbed at the man, trying to pull him back. Stop! Don't! I screamed, reaching for the knife. His eyes were wild with rage. He stabbed my hand. I fell back, screaming in genuine pain. Claire was across the room, but ran to me when she saw my bleeding hand. In that instant, I imagined what life would be like if Claire had been my partner instead. We'd be normal. We put Emma's happiness first. We'd argue, but never hurt each other. Morgan and this violent man were far more compatible than Claire and I could ever be. But the thought filled me with shame. I didn't intervene when he stabbed Claire. I watched as he pulled the knife out and stabbed her again. Her blood sprayed across me again and again, until finally I stood. Emma appeared in her doorway. I grabbed her, and I pushed her back into her room and locked the door. She sobbed. "Why is Daddy here? Where's Mommy?" Tears streamed down her face. "I don't like Daddy." "Be quiet. He'll come in here if you make noise." She saw my bleeding hand and helped me push her desk against the door, choking back sobs. "Listen, your father threatened us and stole our knife. My girlfriend called the police. It'll be okay." Deep inside, unlike with the cats, I actually regretted this. Police arrived and arrested Claire's ex-husband. The news reported that Emma would go into foster care and that the ex-husband had threatened a couple into letting him inside. Our names weren't mentioned. Morgan was ecstatic that night, thrilled that Claire and Emma were gone. I felt numb. I don't remember the details. Morgan became obsessed with my injured hand, for which never healed properly. People pitied me when they saw the cast. I couldn't use my dominant hand for months. Fortunately, my job didn't require manual dexterity, so I adapted to using my left hand. Morgan loved examining it. The stitches, then the healing wound after they were removed, then the scar tissue. One night, she told me something unexpected. "I have a friend I used to kill with. I called her constantly, but you've become exactly what I wanted. We could make this permanent." "Marriage?" I asked. "Yeah, time for me to play the trophy wife of a wealthy man." "I don't know if my father's leaving the company to me or my brother," I said, trying to create distance. Morgan stared at my scarred hand, and I feared she'd tear the skin open. Instead, she licked my fingers and inhaled the scent of the old wound. "Doesn't matter. This hand changed everything. I thought you were weak, but you can do terrible things. Your legs are covered in cuts. You have my name tattooed in the most degrading place. This hand was injured to make us look innocent. I'm not as brave as you think. I know, but I don't mind. You know you're worthless. You'll always need me. Not after this." I pulled my hand away and met her eyes. "Claire could have been my wife. Emma could have been my daughter. Do you understand what you did? You only saw it as entertainment." "Your wife? Claire?" Morgan laughed. "I'm serious. When I was stabbed, she tried to help me. A complete stranger. And you orchestrated her murder for fun, like I killed those cats for you." "Fuck you then," Morgan said. "I thought this might be fun. I thought you'd have the guts for more." "You don't need me," I said. Nah, I waited. "Do what you want. Kill me if you want." Morgan frowned, then made a disgusted sound. "What? Why would I? I'll just leave." "What about the contract?" "I'll owe you half my assets and monthly payments for 15 years. I remembered every clause she'd written. "Oh, that. Consider it a parting gift." She started packing immediately. She left behind all the luxury items I'd bought, the designer purses, the fur coats, the expensive shoes still in boxes, the makeup on her vanity. "That's everything?" I asked, confused. "I can ship the rest to your new address, or hire movers." "No need." Morgan smiled, and I almost begged her to stay. I thought about how perfect we could have been if she'd had real emotions, a real personality. Our chemistry, my money, her charisma. She was the girlfriend everyone envied. "Where are you going?" "A hotel?" I asked. She kissed me one last time. When I reached for her face, she pulled away. Cold air replaced her warmth. "You'll never know. You'll never know anything about me again." And like every other time she'd left, without goodbye or acknowledgement, she simply wheeled her suitcase out the door, dressed plainly like any other woman you'd pass on the street. Our relationship had started the same way. A girl who liked the same obscure pastry, random encounters at a bookstore, a casual arrangement that became official. Then came the boundaries she set that I didn't want to cross because she was so perfect. Then came the love. Be careful if you meet someone who smiles when you accidentally hit an animal. That could be Morgan. You're Morgan.